the hypothetical unification of Ethiopia and Egypt. The prospect of a unified Ethiopia and Egypt, two of Africa's most historically significant and populous nations, presents a profound geopolitical thought experiment. Let us explore a hypothetical scenario moving beyond the immediate improbability of such a merger, given existing deep-seated tension. The relationship between Egypt and Ethiopia is not merely a modern construct, but is deeply interwoven with millennia of shared history, marked by both profound connection and persistent competition. Understanding this historical tapestry is essential to comprehending the complexities and potential pathways of any future integration. The historical ties between Egypt and Ethiopia extend back to the ancient Egyptian eras, encompassing not only political interactions but also significant religious and cultural exchanges. A cornerstone of this enduring relationship is the deep religious bond between the Ethiopian Church and the Egyptian Coptic Church. This affiliation began in the 4th century AD, with the Ethiopian Church historically associated with and deriving its Orthodox faith and culture from the Egyptian Coptic Church. For centuries, an Egyptian bishop oversaw Ethiopian clerics, a tradition that continued until the Ethiopian Church gained its full independence in 1959. This shared Orthodox Christian heritage has profoundly shaped the cultural landscape of both nations. Beyond Christianity, the interreligious relationship extends to the Islamic faith. This demonstrates a shared religious landscape that transcends a single faith. Furthermore, linguistic commonalities underscore this intertwined heritage. Arabic, Ge'ez, and Amharic, the official language of Ethiopia, all belong to the Afro-Asiatic linguistic family. Arabic has notably influenced Ge'ez and Amharic, evidenced by shared loanwords and the Arabic origin of terms like Abuna, archbishop, and Habasha, a term for Semitic-speaking Ethiopians and Eritreans. Cultural practices also reveal deep connections, such as the shared emphasis on modesty in dress and the prohibition of pork for both Ethiopian Orthodox Christians and Muslims. The historical practice of exorcism, known as zar, also existed in both cultures, though it is now considered taboo or illegal in certain contexts. These historical, religious, and cultural commonalities rooted in centuries of interaction suggest a foundational affinity that could, in a hypothetical scenario, be leveraged for unity. Periods of cooperation and conflict. Despite these profound shared roots, the political relationship between Egypt and Ethiopia has frequently been characterized by tension and conflict. The 19th century marked a significant turning point with the rise of tensions during Muhammad Ali Pasha's reign, where British intervention notably prevented an attack on Ethiopia. European powers consistently intervened in the region, often to safeguard their own interests, as illustrated by Britain's concerns over Ottoman decrees, transferring Red Sea ports to Muhammad Ali Pasha. This established a pattern of external influence shaping the regional power dynamics. A critical and enduring source of contention arose from colonial-era agreements concerning the Nile River. The Anglo-Ethiopian Treaty of 1902, signed without Ethiopia's full participation or consent, stipulated that Ethiopia would not construct any dam on Lake Tana or the Subat River without British approval. This agreement, alongside the 1929 and 1959 Nile Waters Agreements, disproportionately allocated water shares to Egypt and Sudan, effectively disregarding Ethiopia's rights despite its contribution of over 80% of the Nile's flow. Ethiopia has consistently rejected these treaties as inequitable relics of colonialism. Nonetheless, periods of diplomatic and economic engagement also existed. Diplomatic relations formally commenced in 1930, with Egypt elevating its representation to ambassadorial level in Ethiopia. Economic ties included Ethiopia exporting coffee, fabrics, and shoes to Egypt, and Egypt exporting food products. Following World War II, both nations, having experienced the impacts of colonialism, became active participants in the anti-colonial movement, attending the Bandung Conference and becoming founding members of the Organization of African Unity, OAU, in 1963. This period reflected a shared aspiration for African self-determination and regional cooperation. The Cold War era, however, saw a divergence in their geopolitical alignments, leading to increased tensions and proxy conflicts. Under President Nasser, Egypt initially supported the UN resolution for Eritrea's annexation to Ethiopia and utilized diplomatic tools, aid, and religious ties to foster friendly relations. Yet, Ethiopia grew increasingly suspicious of Egypt's expanding influence, particularly after the construction of the Aswan Dam and the nationalization of the Suez Canal in 1956. During President Sadat's era, relations became severely strained due to Egypt's support for the Eritrean Liberation Movement and Ethiopia's backing of the South Sudan movement. The Dewater File emerged as a major point of contention when Sadat announced a project in 1979 to divert Nile water for Sinai irrigation, prompting Ethiopian complaints and threats. Egypt, aligning with the West, joined the anti-communist Safari Club and covertly supported Somalia during the Ogaden War against Ethiopia, which was aligned with the Soviet Union. This complex interplay of cooperation and conflict shaped by external interference, differing national interests, especially over the Nile, and ideological alignments established a foundation of distrust that persists to the present day. The enduring significance of the Nile River. The Nile River stands as the most consistent and potent source of both connection and contention between Egypt and Ethiopia. It has been a lifeline for both nations for millennia, with its waters intrinsically linked to their survival, development, and national identity. As previously noted, colonial-era agreements disproportionately allocated water shares to Egypt and Sudan, largely at Ethiopia's expense, despite Ethiopia contributing over 80–85% of the Nile's flow via the Blue Nile. Egypt views the Nile as a matter of national security and an existential threat if its water supply is jeopardized, famously declaring it a red line. This deeply embedded national security and identity issue for both countries remains the primary obstacle to and potential benefit of any hypothetical unification. Underlying dynamics. The paradox of shared heritage and persistent conflict. The historical narrative reveals a striking paradox. Despite profound historical, religious, and even linguistic commonalities that could serve as a powerful basis for unity, political relations between Egypt and Ethiopia have consistently been fraught with tension, competition, and proxy conflicts, particularly concerning the Nile and regional influence. From Ethiopia's perspective, the GERD is a crucial national development project. It is essential for hydroelectric power generation, addressing a significant energy deficit where only 44% of the population has access to electricity. The dam is also vital for industrial development and achieving economic self-sufficiency, positioning Ethiopia as a potential regional energy hub. Ethiopia asserts its sovereign right to utilize its natural resources for the benefit of its people and as a matter of national pride. Conversely, Egypt views the GERD as an existential threat to its water and food security, given that the Nile supplies over 90% of its freshwater needs. Concerns revolve around the potential for reduced water flow during the dam's filling, particularly during drought years, and Ethiopia's perceived lack of transparency regarding its mitigation measures. Egyptian officials estimate that even a mere 2% reduction in Nile water could lead to a loss of approximately 81,000 hectares of irrigated land. Despite over a decade of protracted negotiations since 2012, including mediation efforts by the United States, the World Bank, and the African Union, a legally binding agreement on the GERD remains elusive. Key disagreements persist over the speed of filling the reservoir. Ethiopia seeks 6 years, while Egypt insists on 10 years, and the establishment of clear rules for drought management. Ethiopia has proceeded with unilateral filling of the dam, completing its 5th filling in mid-August. This has prompted Egypt to accuse Ethiopia of violating international law and to issue threats of taking all measures to defend its interests. Analysts widely consider the conflict to be approximately 90% political, with technical and legal issues largely agreed upon, indicating a fundamental lack of trust and political will. Both nations are currently governed by repressive governments that have pursued unstable, violent policies at home and abroad, which further complicates the transparent, multilateral path necessary for a resolution. The GERD is not merely an infrastructure project, it encapsulates the deep-seated mistrust, conflicting developmental priorities, and nationalistic narratives that define the current relationship. Regional power dynamics, Ethiopia's quest for sea access, and Egypt's encirclement strategy. Ethiopia's landlocked status, a consequence of Eritrea's independence in 1996, has become a significant driver of its foreign policy. Ethiopia is actively seeking direct access to the Red Sea, viewing it as a natural right vital for its large population and economic potential. This ambition was formalized in January 2024 through a maritime deal with Somaliland, a self-declared independent region of Somalia, granting Ethiopia access to the port of Berbera and a naval base. This agreement has provoked strong condemnation from Mogadishu, which views it as a severe violation of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. In response, Egypt has adopted a counter-strategy, often described as an encirclement policy. Egypt has actively fostered closer ties with Somalia, providing military aid, including weapons and ammunition, and deploying troops to Mogadishu. This engagement is explicitly aimed at thwarting Ethiopia's Red Sea ambitions and gaining leverage in the ongoing GERD negotiations. Egypt perceives any Ethiopian presence on the Red Sea as a direct threat to its national security and the security of international maritime movement, particularly concerning the vital Suez Canal. Egypt is also actively strengthening its relationships with other nations bordering Ethiopia, including Eritrea, South Sudan, Kenya, Uganda, and Djibouti, and exploring military cooperation and intelligence sharing. Furthermore, Egypt is reportedly seeking to replace Ethiopian troops in Somalia with its own forces as part of the African Union's peacekeeping mission, a move designed to further undermine Ethiopia's regional influence.